Hi, everybody. So, as Dave kindly said there, yes, I'm an ex-primary head teacher. I was an ex-primary head teacher for 10 years, and I am the CEO and founder of Cornerstones Education. Uh, Today, I wanted to make it as educational as possible and give you an insight into what I feel is going to be the future of education and, more importantly, what its role is in learning. At Cornerstones Education, we are proud to have been supporting primary schools with our curriculum content and assessment and curriculum management platform since 2010. In education, I always think it's good to look at the past and the present to make sure we make the right decisions to improve teaching and learning in the future. I'm aging myself here when I say, right, when I started as a senior leader in schools, everybody was talking about levels, whether that was level two, level three, level four, 4B, 4C, to be or not to be, five, and then we even got six dumped on us. Absolutely crazy times. Then it was points and progress. Progress measured in points. At first, it was pure linear progression. Of course, that's exactly how kids learn. Straight lines, year on year, not a problem. Yeah, right. And 3 points progress was doing great. I remember saying, oh, it's like 3 points for a win. Love it. Football analogies, all of that. But, of course, it soon became pretty apparent that to be judged good or better in inspection, you had to show more than 3 points progress in English and maths. This created a narrow curriculum and the culture of having to teach to test. Just have a read at what Amanda Spielman said. I'm sure many of you have seen it. Finally, an acknowledgement of how meaningless some assessment practices had been forced to become. That was back in 2018. But national tests remained as the powers that be continue to want league tables. Schools continue to weigh the pigs far more often than needed. I love a bit of Game of Thrones. We have to break the wheel. Then take what is good, what can inform teachers, leaders, and stakeholders, and make it better. Focus on assessment as an integral part of the curriculum and a tool to support teaching and learning. Tests are part of assessment and can be very useful in supporting learning and comparing attainment nationally. But we have to understand them to get the best from them. I would like £1 for every person in education I've talked to who thinks scaled and standardized scores are the same. I'll apologise on two fronts here. I'm really sorry if you know all this and you understand standard deviation, norm and criteria referencing, and bell curves. But for those who don't, I'll try and simplify it. So the next few minutes, I'm just going to dig into what those mean. Have a quick scan of these bullet points. Okay, so standardized tests enable comparisons between different tests because they usually give the average raw score on a test the value of 100. This is irrespective of the difficulty of the test. So it is easy to see whether a child is above or below the average of 100. 50% will be at and above 100 and 50% will be below. These tests can also be age standardized, But that's a rabbit hole we haven't got time to go down. And the whole summer births and stays not age, I'd love to spend hours talking about that, but we've not got time. Scaled scores are for national end of key stage tests and ensure the national expected standard is constant year on year, and the results of the annual national tests are comparable. It's as if the children, in essence, are taking the same test, even though they're different year on year. Scaled scores try to mitigate the slight fluctuations in the difficulty of annual tests. We all know what it's like when that Key Stage 2 test comes and there's that one killer question, and sometimes there's two. What experts do is each year they match the raw scores and they make sure that they then set the marks available that will be done to achieve the national expected standard and the threshold of the raw score being taken. And that's how they work that out. And they give that a scaled score of 100. This is a norm reference bell curve used for standardized scores. 50% of children get a standardized score of 100, as I've said, or more. Those at and above that middle line. But more often than 50% of children reach national expectations. That's because the raw score is given lower than the average. So you might then get 79% that will achieve national expectation. At Cornerstones, to help schools and support monitoring of learning, we look at the 34% here that's just below the average score. I'd never say any child has no chance of achieving national expectation based on a test score. That would be wrong. But looking statistically at it, any child with a standardized score that is actually sort of below the 85, so these children here, they would almost certainly not achieve national expectation in a similar test. Children can be classified as borderline, and that is about 85 to 90 standardized scores, and some of them would achieve national expectation. Any children scoring between sort of 91 and 95 would have even more of a chance of achieving national expectation. So that's those children that are up here, just within, and they're achieving 91 to 95 standardized score. As a rule of thumb, a child achieving a standardized score of 95, so that's down here, should achieve the scale score of 100 or above, and therefore achieve national expectation. So a standardized score of 95 roughly correlates to a scaled score of 100. But be warned, it's not an exact science. That's a lot of theory and stats. Let's get back to what we actually care about, helping children to learn and become happy and purposeful humans. But I hope that has cleared up a little bit about scaled and standardized scores. Look at that. I cannot wait to employ this child. They've sussed how to guarantee they get the right answer. That child can think, can suss things out. Teacher assessment is absolutely vital because teachers know the children. Yes, people may argue that bias and that if you know one child and you like a child, you're going to give them higher scores and you give girls higher scores than boys and all of that. But actually, we're professionals. Let us be professionals aware of bias. Let us assess subjects and the child as a whole, because sometimes a spoken answer reveals far more than a written one. And sometimes, as demonstrated here, a written one reveals far more than expected. They both carry more meaning when you know the child. Why do we assess? Well, there can only be two reasons. One is support teaching and learning, and two is to provide helpful information for parents and stakeholders. I don't know how many people have seen this book. I read it when I first came into sort of teaching, moved towards senior leadership, and had a massive interest in assessment. The publication of this book, Inside the Black Box, by Paul Black and Dylan William, for me was a seminal moment in primary education. We know, and research still today supports, that assessment for learning, AFL, is critical. This includes formative and summative assessment and, crucially, those interactions with children to understand where they are and how we can support their learning and development. Yet, over 20 years later, we still strive to embed assessment for learning properly in schools. These 3 bullet points help define the types of assessment in our schools, and they've basically been ratified almost by the Ofsted reports that have been out and everything else. To assess children's learning and the impact of the curriculum, you will need to put each type of this assessment in place. This should also consider your position in more formal testing, including any national testing requirements and the option to purchase more complex assessment systems. Let's have a dig down a little bit into each of those. Assessment for learning and assessment as learning can easily dovetail together to produce quality formative assessment. When built into the curriculum, this type of assessment can provide valuable insight into how teachers can better help children embed the knowledge and skills of your curriculum. For example, using skilled questioning at the beginning, during, and end of lessons, as well as low-stake quizzes, can all help inform, in the short term, what children know and need, rather than a means of generating scores and levels. The benefits of low-stake quizzes and questioning as a means of assessing what children have learned include reducing children's anxiety, encouraging children to recall learned knowledge, reinforcing conceptual understanding, providing feedback to children about their strengths and weaknesses, enabling the teacher and the child to determine what aspects of the curriculum they might need to revisit or require further explanation, and also avoiding placing undue pressure on children to perform at a high level. Assessment of learning must be purposeful and provide accurate information about the impact of your curriculum. Assessment of learning is usually done through school-made tests or via online assessment and tracking systems. In the case of tests, it's important to remember that too much testing can lead to more stressful experience of children and even a narrowing of the curriculum. Again, I'll go back to that image of weighing the pig. It can lead to an overemphasis on testing rather than teaching, even if that's subconscious. A test once every half or full term is reasonable and should avoid test fatigue. It's also essential to foster a positive testing culture. For example, using tests as a basis for discussions with children about their learning, sharing their successes and encouraging resilience in those who need it is all part of a reassuring test culture. I remember clearly when actually you had children in school, and if the culture's right, they actually enjoy doing tests because they don't feel threatened by them, and they see the value of spotting their own mistakes, the errors, learning from others, being able to teach others. I hope you've all seen this document, but I know how busy you are. Now and again, I do get time to read things that I never used to be able to find the time for as a head teacher. So I'm going to just skim through some of this and highlight it for those who haven't or those who have for a refresher, because this is an important document that I'm sure will be shaping the future of assessment. Have a quick scan at these. Key points to their recommended principles are: not for holding schools to account. Yippee. Holistic picture reflecting the whole curriculum. Yippee. Support inclusive education. Agree. But schools need help and the finances and resources to support this. It is scary the number of schools that are having to get rid of teaching assistants due to budget constraints. A 5-year plan with representative sampling part of the system. Great. Very interestingly, they're looking at year 1 and year 4 to be key points for summative assessment. And again, it's mentioned art and humanities to be included. Thank goodness. These bullet points highlight some of those key points. Research is often secondary focused. Here at Cornerstones, because we are based in EYFS and primary, whenever anybody works for us and if they mention the word student, I also say, well, we tend to say we send children and pupils, because for me, that's primary. As soon as I see the word student, I either think international or secondary. A lot of the research out there is secondary focused and sometimes just a nod to primary, and maybe it might be a wink to EYFS, but often not at all. Beware. And this document says that. Teacher to collect, analyze, and interpret data. Yes, we know. We are doing that all the time, either through working with, questioning, and listening to children, or more formal methods. It's basically good teaching. Interesting facts here. 89% of parents agree better to have moderated teacher assessment than the current practice. High stake tests cause a distortion in pedagogy, that teaching to test. 95% of stakeholders agree or strongly agreed that statutory tests narrow the curriculum, and 91% agreed or strongly agreed that statutory tests increase teacher workload. They're stark numbers. It's all about getting the information we need while keeping stress for children to an absolute minimum. And allow teachers to make professional judgments. We need to provide the tools, systems, and expertise to be able to do this accurately. For me, accurate teacher assessment and teacher assessment that is supported and linked to the curriculum is absolutely key. So, do not prioritize a narrow range of subjects too much. We've been saying that in primary for a long time. Lesser the focus on some of the types of knowledge in the national curriculum. Again, let's stop it being narrow. And interesting, does this mean we get to swing back to knowledge and skills? At Cornerstones, we have always held firm and included skills as well as knowledge in the work we do. I do not think anyone would argue with these 2 bullet points. So, to summarise, the recommendations are the main purpose of assessment is to improve learning. Well, yeah. Assessment should be ambitious, evidence-based, democratically and collaboratively developed with sufficiently timed implementation, i.e., they're saying that to develop anything takes time. We should be listening to everybody, and it's going to be this 5-year process. The emphasis should be on formative assessment. I would say assessment for learning, which includes both formative and summative, but yes, the emphasis should be formative. Education must be inclusive, of course. An assessment should be holistic and reflect the whole curriculum. Year 1 and Year 4 should be key summative points so schools have time to act. And a separation of assessment and accountability. I really like that. We know when the times when Ofsted were just judging schools on results in SATs was a bad time. It should support and underpin the national curriculum, aims and problems of study. So that's telling me that it's still going to be pushing towards a national curriculum in whatever form that becomes. The assessment system increases teachers' sense of expertise and workload is considered. Any change involves workload. Any change involves upskilling. It just has to be proportional. Change is on the way. We've got the curriculum and assessment review. The curriculum is now, and I strongly believe will remain, accepted as the progression model. But even back in 2015, more forward-thinking professionals were beginning to talk about age-related expectations. I called them ARE. These expectations work when directly linked to the curriculum being taught and learned. I like the term curriculum-related expectation. I think it was used first by David Dido. He went on to state that it becomes reasonable to expect children to have met these expectations because they are or should be directly connected to what has been taught. How often do we see in our schools where you've got a separate assessment system to the curriculum that's being taught? That's wrong. I am pleased the government is undertaking not a curriculum review, but a curriculum and assessment review. We now have the opportunity to change and align assessment. Our children deserve and need an ambitious, broad and balanced curriculum. For that to happen and the curriculum to truly become the progression model, assessment for learning has to reunite with the curriculum. They should walk hand in hand from nursery to year 6 like an inseparable couple. Children progress through that curriculum needs to be monitored. So you've got your curriculum in place. It has to be monitored and supported as an ongoing live process rather than simply tracked. We'd all also agree that primary schools aim to provide a well-rounded, balanced curriculum that supports the progress of the whole child. That's why we all went into teaching in the first place. If you've seen Jonathan Lear's presentation, and I know he was there at a Blue Cow event not long ago, when he looks at what primary teachers think are the most important outcomes of a curriculum in pictorial form, it's not surprising that teachers want children to be happy, caring, purposeful humans. This, and enabling children to become numerate and literate and develop a love of learning, entails building relationships and supporting their individual needs. Assessment is part of this. Another assessment discussion point to raise is around capability and evidence. I recommend reading Guy Claxton's blog post, Rethinking Assessment, a Crib Sheet. in which he discusses methods of evidencing capability. I've always preferred the word capability and our role in unlocking it when the word potential or expected standards. Who are we to say anything or make a judgment about somebody's potential? I much prefer to talk about unlocking capability. Anyway, I digress. I'll get back to Guy. So Claxton highlighted a great point made by Dylan William, that aircraft fly by making constant small adjustments. They don't wait until they have flown 3,000 miles before checking that they're on course. That is why the best way to evidence and hopefully unlock children's capability is through teaching a well-designed curriculum with integral formative and ipsative assessment. I'll explain ipsative assessment shortly, but now let's stick with that curriculum design. Curriculum design with integrated assessment based on a solid pedagogical foundation, yet localized and contextualized for your children and their cultural capital is key. I've had a lot to do with curriculum design over my career and a lot to do with this book written by Mel. She's my partner in pretty much everything, apart from at times my obsessive following of a couple of sporting teams. But if you're looking for curriculum development now or in the future, I would unashamedly recommend this is a brilliant practical guide to support you at whatever stage of development. And we would both argue that a curriculum should be designed around what is remarkable, not what is markable. It has the power to develop perseverance, curiosity, open-mindedness, intellectual humility, rational skepticism, innovative thinking, collaboration, and empathy. These traits can impact children's success in an ever-changing marketplace and definitely an ever-changing world. As research from James Heckman and Angela Duckworth and others have shown. With a curriculum in place that encourages children to use and apply their learning and innovate, you will have ample evidence of their capability. Teachers are then more able to monitor and support children through ongoing, accurate assessment for learning. Just like William's analogy of piloting that plane. If you get your curriculum right, your monitoring right, you'll be able to make those adjustments. So back to ipsative assessment. This is the meaning that I wish to highlight. That's what we do in EYFS through to year 6 as good teachers. We get to know the children, what they need to make the best progress they can as a whole child, from where they currently are. Having indicators and being able to monitor, find and plug gaps in subject areas is an important aspect of this. Progress is not linear or easy to measure, and it should never be based on two simplified numbers to another number. I hope those days are gone, and linear progress is a complete myth. Any measurement, and I use that word in inverted commas, of progress has to support teaching and learning. The overarching aim we all share. Progress, for me, is consistent, inconsistent, or notable learning or development between 2 points in time. If you look at this infographic here, you can see on, I've gone wrong there, sorry about that. You can see on one side you've got attainment and the other side you've got progress. And that's the definition of progress I just gave you there. Notable, consistent, and inconsistent. Progress is never completely linear. It's never a straight line. Here, while pupil 1 attainment is still high, you can see that it's deemed good because it's above or greater depth, whichever word is assigned. But the most important thing is they need to have an eye kept on them because the progress is inconsistent. It's going down. Pupil 2 is solid, but we have to check for coasting or any dip. Pupil 3 is starting to fly. This is that child that you've just unlocked something and they really are starting to go. Pupil is also actually making consistent progress. This could be a real success story, especially with children with special educational needs. We work with schools with children with severe special educational needs, where if a child is not regressing, they're actually doing really, really well. Anything can be seen here. Can you do anything else that can get that notable progress, which will move this child closer towards the national expectation that everybody wants? All this needs to be integral to the broad and balanced curriculum being taught. And technology can help with this. But it's about balance. Teaching is an art, especially when your learners are aged between 3 and 12. Providing quality education is about the skills and knowledge of the teacher. That's teacher expertise. Engagement of the learner, their relationship with the teacher and the curriculum content that the teacher is working with. And then there's good use of technology to support both teacher and learner. Any technology should support teacher assessment and save hours of time in monitoring, analysis, and reporting. Technology can be good or bad. The education part of EdTech is the important part. Teachers should have to ensure whatever assessment system they use, whether that's advanced technology, spreadsheets, notes, that it supports them as the current teacher and will help the children's next teacher. It'll help leaders, it lessens workload for leaders, and most importantly, it enhances learning for children. Ask yourself these questions. Is there assessment technology that can enhance teacher learning that you are not using or could be using better? I get the opportunity to see many, many schools using what we provide in very many different ways. It breaks my heart sometimes when I see a school and they're not using the full capability that's available to them, especially when I've just been in a school up the road that are saying this has revolutionized our workload. The right assessment technology, once embedded into general classroom and leadership practice, can provide real long-term gains, including saving hours of time. I was speaking to an executive head on Tuesday how the assessment on our platform has saved the staff in two very different schools so much time. We provide a platform to completely manage your curriculum and assessment, whether you use the content we provide or not. We have the opportunity for real assessment for learning. I've talked about the importance of any system being fully integrated with your curriculum. I've touched on research. I've touched on the issues with tests and how we can make sure we get the best out of them. I'm very proud that our platform, Maestro, is in many schools supporting teachers, leaders, and enhancing learning for children. I'm also proud that we support all schools, whether they want to use our content or not. If they just want to chat about what they're currently doing, we'll help them to see if they can do it a better way or utilize what they're already using in a better way. I've talked at you, and I apologise for that. I much prefer a dialogue between people and to talk to individual schools. I want to open up now to any questions that you may have, and I will try to answer them on the fly. If not, I will get back to you. And because I've already been doing this for over half an hour now, I will end it after those questions rather than jumping online and showing you what we do. I can do that individually if you wish to see it. So if you want to either shout up or drop anything in the chat, I will have a look at that now and answer any questions before I finish the webinar.
Simon, the first question by Michelle in the chat, I think it was when you were talking about Claxton. I think that
Guy
question.
Claxton. Well, the books are, if it's Guy Claxton, it's that if she searches the capability and evidence, Guy Claxton, she'll find that. The other one is the Dylan William, and always remember that by it's a 1L in William, and she'll find that, and that's inside the black box. And then the other one is Mel's book, and that's probably the best way of showing it. It's that one. So I hope you've got that, Michelle. I think they were the three ones that I mentioned through the talk. Has anybody else got any questions or anything they would like me to just touch on? Or are you all ready to go out into the dark, which it is now, and get off home?